Hi, this is Dame Pasty from WatchersOnTheWall.com, and I'm here with your weekly brush-up of last week's episode entitled The Gift. Remember, spoilers are at the end. Now let's get started. We start out at Castle Black with the perfectly coiffed John letting Tormund out of jail. As he is mounting up for their little jaunt to Hardhome, Tormund gives Alliser, I just sucked on a lemon thorn, the hard stare. John puts Thorne in charge of Castle Black. Thorne tells John that he still thinks the idea of the Watch allying themselves with the wildlings is a bad idea. John says goodbye to Sam, and Sam gives him some dragon glass just in case. I'm really excited about the appearance of big frozen baddies next week. How about you? After John leaves, we see Sam, Gilly, and Mini Sam sitting next to a bedridden Aemon, who is playing with the baby. The baby's laugh reminds him of his younger brother Aegon, a.k.a. Egg, who took the throne after Aemon refused it. Aemon tells Gilly in a very serious tone to take this baby south before it's too late. We then jump to Winterfell, where we see Theon taking a tray of food into a locked room. And in the room, we see Sansa laying on the bed, crying, with the windows wide open and the snow coming in. Apparently, she's been locked in her room ever since the wedding, and Ramsay has been raping her every night. She asks Theon to help her, and he says no because Ramsay will punish her, and him. She says it can't get any worse, and he basically says, oh, hell yeah, it can. Then she stands up and does something we've longed for. She takes Theon and shakes the snot out of him. Sansa makes him promise to take a candle to the top of the broken tower and light it. So Theon leaves her room and does exactly what I thought he would, which was run to Ramsay and tell him. The scene cuts to a brief view of Brienne standing outside of Winterfell looking forlorn and colder than crud while she watches the castle waiting for that darn candle that will never show. We leave the wintry weather outside of Winterfell to the toasty confines of Master Aemon's room where Sam, Gilly, and Little Sam are watching over him. It seems he is fading quickly, and Gilly tells Sam he'll have to give his eulogy tomorrow. His passing is really sad, and I love the inclusion of the line, Egg, I had a dream that I was old. And from a selfish standpoint, the timing on his passing is bad, bad, bad for John, because who else had any authority to advocate for him at Castle Black? The next day, Sam gives him a lovely eulogy, and they set the funeral pyre alight. Of course, Thorne, in his usual annoying fashion, takes the opportunity to chide Sam that he is losing all of his friends. Back at Winterfell, we see Sansa outside. Unfortunately, she's been summoned by Ramsay. As Ramsay is walking along the walls and talking to Sansa about their glorious supposed future as Wardens of the North, she grabs a kind of corkscrew tool that was laying out. Then Sansa does a curious thing. She stands up to Ramsay. She points out that a legitimate heir to the Bolton line will soon be born and supplant him. Now, while it's a dangerous ploy, it's actually pretty smart. I think Sansa has figured out that Ramsay does need to maintain certain appearances in front of the other Northern lords, so there's only so much he can do to her. I think she's figured out that he won't do to her what he did to Theon. Ramsay takes it relatively well and then claims his being a bastard doesn't matter because it didn't matter for Jon, and he tells Sansa, who didn't know yet, that Jon had become Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. I think this gives her hope, and Ramsay did that on purpose too, because he follows that up with revealing that Theon betrayed her, and then he shows her the flayed corpse of the poor elderly woman who was her contact within the castle. You know, Ramsay's end cannot come soon enough for me, and I'm sure you guys all feel the same way. Then they do a quick cut to Theon, who has the nerve to look sad. You know, Theon's days are numbered too, and whatever sympathy I might have had for him is quickly evaporating. Poor Sansa is escorted then by the armed guards back to her room, and before she leaves, Ramsay makes sure he gets in a threat about his nightly rape by saying how long the winter nights are now. The one good thing that might come out of this betrayal is that Sansa will realize that it's all up to her now, and she won't waste any more time trying to get others to help her. Maybe her grabbing that tool is the beginning of that. At least I hope it is. From Ramsay's bitter cold and empty heart, we go to Stannis' army, who appear to be encamped in the snow somewhere on the way to Winterfell. The soldiers appear to be sick, freezing, or both. Davos arrives to give Stannis bad news. Dozens of horses are freezing every night. Hundreds of soldiers have deserted. They're running out of food, and they've been cut off from their supply line. In light of all that, Davos advises returning to Castle Black, but Stannis refuses and says, they march forward to victory or defeat, but not backwards. Davos briefly looks to Melisandre for support, but he sees nothing there but fanaticism, so he just leaves the tent. Then Stannis starts questioning Mel and her visions and just how accurate they are. He tries to initiate sex again, but Mel isn't having it. Stannis asks her again if she's sure, and she says she walked on the battlements of Winterfell, had seen the flayed man banner on the ground. But that doesn't mean Stannis will be victorious. It could be someone else who's victorious. It also doesn't mean it will be anytime soon. There's no time placement. There's no context. Those visions are without context, damn it. So she could be totally full of shit. So instead of relying just on her visions, she says, oh, well, we'll just sacrifice Shireen, which is exactly what we've been forecasting for weeks now. And she keeps putting pressure on him until he just kicks her out of the tent. I swear, if she sacrifices Shireen, I will reach to the screen and snatch that bitch bald. Back to Castle Black, where we see Gilly doing some laundry and a couple Night's Watchmen confront her and attempt to rape her. Sam tries to fight them off, but the poor lovable doofus doesn't even know how to hold the darn sword properly. They disarm him, and one of them punches him in the face while the other restrains Gilly. I was impressed that Sam took that many hard blows to the head and stayed conscious. Sam must have the hardest head in the entire universe. Those blows really should have knocked him out. And he was boss getting back up and standing up to them again, even knowing he was probably going to lose. That's real bravery when you know you're going to get your ass kicked, but you get up and fight anyway. I also love that Ghost came in with the assist, but I do have to question, why is he not with John? Only thing I can figure is that John left him behind specifically to protect Sam and Gilly, so that Sam is not entirely without friends at Castle Black. Anyway, Gilly manages to get Sam back to his room where she cleans him up and tries to make him promise to leave the next time, otherwise he'll just get killed. She'd rather deal with it on her own and know that Sam is safe and then able to take care of the baby if she should die. But he refuses to leave her in such a situation. Then Gilly does something that puzzled many viewers. She initiates sex with Sam. It's her idea to kiss him, her idea to climb on top of him. Many wondered how she could do that after almost being raped. Obviously, we don't know what's in her mind, but I suspect she felt gratitude to Sam and that she has genuine feelings for him. Face it, he is the only man in her entire life to have loved her and asked literally nothing from her. He's risked his life on several occasions to protect her, and has even considered risking his vows to the Night's Watch to stay with her. So far we spent the entire episode in Westeros, but now we zip across the sea somewhere on the way to Meereen, where the slaver stops to auction off the slaves that include Jorah and Tyrion. Their captor oversells Jorah a bit, but manages to sell him pretty quickly, and Tyrion panics a little bit because he knows damn well that he needs Jorah to stay alive and to get to Dany. Notice how Jorah looks to Tyrion as he's being led away to come up with an idea on how they can stay together. Already they're working together, and Jorah's relying on Tyrion's smarts. Tyrion pulls the guy holding his chain to the ground and beats the tar out of him to show that he's part of the fighting team with Jorah. Everybody laughs and thinks it's a hoot, so the guy who bought Jorah decides to buy Tyrion too, but for much less gold. Then Tyrion reaches a little too far, too soon, and tries to talk the new owner into freeing them and paying them a wage to fight. All he gets for that is a big backhand to the face, which effectively shuts Tyrion up. Still in Meereen, we see Dany having a little postcoital convo with Daario, and he's jealous of her upcoming marriage to Hizdahr. He wants to marry her instead, but they both know she can't. He tells her she is the only person in Meereen who is not free, which upsets her a bit, probably because it's true. He then offers her one last bit of advice. He says, take all the masters on the day of the great games and slaughter them all. Dany really doesn't want to believe him on this issue. She remains hopeful that she can find a third path, a way to remain in power that doesn't include the wholesale slaughter of entire groups of Meereenese society. Back in Westeros, we are given a beautiful view of the Sept of Baelor. Inside, Lady Olenna encounters the High Sparrow and asks him what his game is. Is he pretending to be a man of the people? How could he be when he's doing Cersei's dirty work, she says. He doesn't bite, just like he didn't bite on any of Cersei's probing either. Finally, Olenna gets tired of the bullshit and asks him what he wants. Does he want gold or something else? Again, he claims that what he wants is justice because the gods demand it. See, Cersei didn't believe him when he said he couldn't be bought. Olenna's not that stupid, and she realizes the truth of the matter. So she tries a different tactic. She tries to threaten him by cutting off shipments of wheat and grain, which means everyone in King's Landing would starve, and then they would blame the High Septon. He turns around and zings a threat right back at her. He basically says that if that happens, the people will rise up against the rich and powerful and destroy them. This is when Olenna realizes that she's not only up against a true fanatic who believes he receives direction from the gods, but that he is politically savvy as well. As she's leaving the Sept, Olenna receives a note from creepy close-talker Mr. Littlefinger. Inside the Red Keep, Tommen is on a hunger strike because his bed is cold and empty. To be fair, Tommen is expressing real frustration because he really can't do anything now. Of course, he doesn't realize that he's been boxed into this corner by his own mother. Cersei sees that he is genuinely upset, so she tries to give him some bullshit platitude about how no matter who you are, there are times when things will be out of your control and he shouldn't feel guilty for what fate has dealt him. It has fuck all to do with fate and everything to do with her machinations. So Tommen is finally pissed off enough to want to kill the Faith militant. Unfortunately, now that they have Marge, she would be the first one to die if he attacked. And Cersei's quick to remind him of this. she offers to go to the High Sparrow on his behalf, and he buys that she actually wants to help Marjorie and Loris. Then she gets all teary-eyed and tells him without any dissembling that she would do anything to keep him happy and safe. And she totally means it. She is so certain that she knows how to do that better than he knows himself. And in so doing, she takes away his autonomy and ironically endangers him by empowering the church to such an extreme degree. We go off to the much-neglected Dorne, where we see Jamie confined in the nicest jail cell ever. Marcella enters and tells Uncle Jamie to just back off, and who does he think he is? It's not like he's her father. She basically tells Jamie that he doesn't know her, and she's not going anywhere, and he can't make her do shit. Jamie looks hurt and confused. Down a little lower in darker, smaller cells, we see the sand snakes have been thrown into a cell across from Bronn, who is finally singing the last verse of that song he started the week before last, The Dornishman's Wife. The youngest sand snake, I think her name is Tyene, enjoyed Bronn singing and engages him in conversation, but he insults her beauty, which was pretty stupid, and she decides it's time for a little payback. She gets him to talk about a woman who's more beautiful than her as she strips for him. As Bronn's heart rate increases, the effects of the poison known as the long farewell from his arm wound kicks in, and it looks like Bronn is going to bite it. Tyene offers Bronn the antidote, but only if he says she is the most beautiful woman in the world. He does that, of course, and then scarfs down the proffered antidote. This is the first scene with the sand snakes that worked, in my honest opinion. However, I do think they lingered a little long on Tyene's assets. But this is Game of Thrones after all, and we are woefully low on our boob count this season. Back to King's Landing, we see Littlefinger staring through one of the peepholes in his destroyed brothel, waiting on Lady Olenna. She shows up and is not best pleased about meeting in a brothel, defunct or not. They dance around a little bit, and Littlefinger's trying to be subtle, talking about moving beyond their past alliance and looking to the future. But Olenna has no time for bullshit today. She's had enough with the High Sparrow. So she cuts to the chase and tells him she knows he doesn't give a tinker's damn about her grandchildren and the future of House Tyrell. And she threatens him, saying if anything unfortunate should happen to her, then they'll never even find what's left of you. Littlefinger denies having a hand in current events, but he says he does have info that Cersei doesn't know and that he will give to Olenna since their interests are still aligned. That gift is supposedly a handsome young man, and Littlefinger implies that he's the one that gave the same gift to Cersei. Now, what this all means doesn't become clear until the end of the episode when Cersei visits the High Sparrow. Back to Meereen, where we see slaves and gladiators preparing to fight in one of the many smaller or what they call lower pits in the area. While Jorah slowly cleans a sword, the owner gives them a speech meant to inspire them to fight hard, as if fighting for one's life wasn't enough, to get to the great pit of Daznak and fight in front of the queen. Now that got Jorah's attention. The master doesn't pick Jorah to go out with the first group. Meanwhile, outside, the slave owner notices that Dany and his daughter are there and gets nervous. He straightens up his fighters and has them make a declaration to Dany that makes her even more uncomfortable than she was before. She really doesn't want to sit here and watch the bloodshed. Inside, Jorah hears this and runs up to the front, and sure enough, it's his Khaleesi. Dany is, of course, unaware of him, and she's focused on the slaughter occurring before her. It doesn't take long for Dany to get tired of it, and she decides to leave. So Jorah gets his sword and helmet and runs out to join the fighting, because it's now or never to get her attention. As Jorah cuts to the fighters like a John Deere harvester through wheat, he knocks them out one right after another instead of killing them. Inside, Tyrion is still chained to the wall and trying desperately to get loose. Out of nowhere, this really big guy comes up and helps Tyrion cut his chains off, but it turns out he wasn't doing him any favors. He wants him to go out and join the free-for-all. So Tyrion is walking out just as Jorah approaches Dany and reveals himself by taking off his helmet. At first, Dany looks kind of relieved to see him, but then she hardens and says, "Get him out of my sight," and poor Jorah's expression. He starts to beg. He is so pitiful. And he realizes he needs to say something, to do something to make her stop, and he blurts out, "I brought you a gift." Tyrion walks up at just that moment and says, "I am the gift. My name is Tyrion Lannister." So back to King's Landing, and we see Cersei arrive at the Sept to do a victory dance in Marjorie's face under the guise of charity. We next see Marjorie in her cell, dirty, coughing, and looking worse for wear, as Cersei enters and gives her a smirk and her leftovers from the night before. Cersei stands there, and every single statement out of her mouth is a complete and utter lie, and Marjorie just wants to kill her. Marjorie calls her a liar and says, you lie like a champ, but you can't do innocence, decency, and concern, and that's probably why Tommen chose me over you. Even in jail, Marge is good at throwing some shade, but she eventually loses her temper and tells Cersei to get out, and Cersei just loves the fact that she made her lose her shit. Is it my imagination here, or does Marge look slightly feral? I kind of wish she did go after her and just get a few scratch marks or something. I would have been really happy with a good cat fight there. So Cersei leaves Marge's cell, and she's looking like the cat that got the cream, as she's led to see the High Sparrow with whom she promised Tommen she would meet. And instead of protesting Marge's cell, her treatment, or anything that Tommen would have wanted her to do, Cersei says Marjorie's accommodations are just fine. And then she asks what's going to happen to dear Marjorie now. The High Septon explains that a trial will be held for both her and Loras, and there will be 7 Septons acting as judges, and the High Sparrow will be one of them. Then Cersei asks what if they confess before the trial, and he says they will receive the mother's mercy, which depends on what their sins were and their degree of contrition. Then Cersei thanks him in the most disingenuous tone that's ever been heard in Westeros for bringing Marjorie and Loras whatever justice they deserve. And as she says this, the High Sparrow is just looking at her really strangely. I mean, look at his expression. It's weird, and Cersei is so oblivious to it because she's so wrapped up in her victory over Marjorie and so sure of the power of her bullshit. She turns to walk away, but he's not done with her yet. He digresses into a history lesson about how old the chapel is, and she could care less, of course. And then he says, Baylor inflicted his vanity on everyone by building the large and ostentatious chapel up above, whereas the simple, unnamed altar is more pious and worthy of respect. And still, Cersei's warning bells are not going off, but boy, oh boy, they should be. Then he starts talking about stripping away all the fancy stuff from the Tyrells. And then the zinger. What will we get when we strip away your finery, Cersei? And still, Cersei doesn't get it. She should have been running for the door at that point. The High Septon starts talking about a young man who came to them broken in body and spirit and who confessed all manner of sin. Of course, we know he's talking about Lancel, but Cersei still doesn't seem to get how much danger she's in. It isn't until Lancel walks into the room that she finally gets it. And then it's too damn late to do anything. And then we know what gift Littlefinger was talking about earlier. Lancel is the gift he gave to Cersei, meaning he had some hand in his turning to the church to confess and implicate Cersei, and in doing so, that allows Lady Olenna to have Cersei out of the way so she can influence Tommen and try to find a way to save Loras and Marjorie. So Cersei tries to leave, and a rather tall septa bars the way. Then the shouting begins about how she is the queen and they've lost their mind, yada yada yada, as they lead her away to her own specially prepared cell with the same offal-filled urine, dirty straw, nasty, dark, dank place that Marjorie has been inhabiting. She threatens the septa and says, "Look at my face, it's the last thing you'll see before you die." I don't know about that. We'll have to see. And then it closes to credits. This was a good recovery from last week, and it restored some of my faith in the Dorne story. It gave me a little hope for Sansa as well. Put on your game face and gird your loins, people, because we're down to the last 3 episodes and the shit is about to get real. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Well, it happened. Melisandre says she wants to sacrifice Shireen just like we thought it would, but I don't think she's going to be successful. It doesn't feel like it's going to go right for him, and I think this is what causes Mel to return to Castle Black and to support Jon. What do you think Sansa's going to do with that corkscrew? She thinks she's really going to overpower Ramsay and stab him and kill him or something? That's not going to happen. I just don't understand what she thinks she's going to do with it. And I'm 999% certain that Ramsay probably put it there on purpose, because Ramsay has this game he plays. He did it with Theon, now he's doing it with her. He gives him a little hope, and then he yanks the rug out from under him. This is how he, quote-unquote, trains and tortures people mentally. So Ramsay's playing a game. Sansa doesn't realize just how deep it goes, and I think that she's going to try to escape again, and she won't get free. In fact, I don't think Sansa's going to escape from Winterfell to the very last episode. How the heck is Sam going to go to Old Town? We know from casting for season 6 that they're casting his entire family, or we're pretty certain they're casting the entire Tarly family. So how is he going to go south? I don't think Alistair Thorne is going to recommend he go to Old Town and the Citadel to become a maester. Maybe Jon makes it back from Hardhome and sends him or something. I'm not quite sure. In regards to Tommen and Lady Olenna, I think she's going to have significant influence on him, and she will find a way to use Tommen to get Loras and Marjorie out of there, and that it will be accomplished differently than it was in the books. But then again, I could be wrong. They could confess, or Marjorie could confess and do acts of contrition so that she's released. But I don't know what's going to happen with Loras. I don't know how he's going to get out of it. And we already know what's going to happen to Cersei, so that's not going to be a big surprise. But boy, oh boy, am I going to enjoy it.